To be followed by Henry Nader and Erhan Tunko. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Doe, commissioners, and congratulations again to the new commissioners for joining. The Taxi Workers, my name is Zubin Soleimani. I'm a staff attorney with the Taxi Workers Alliance. We urge the TLC to pass this rule regarding round-trip tolls in a manner that applies equally to both taxi and for-hire vehicle sectors, including the high-volume for-hire vehicle sector. The point of this rule is pretty straightforward. The point is no driver should have to pay about $7 out of pocket just to keep working when there is simply no other way for them to access other areas of the city to get back to work. TLC has required this payment for round-trip tolls in areas of the city where drivers cannot return to the rest of the city for decades in the taxi sector. Now, just this past January, TLC amended its rules for high-volume for-hire vehicles, including high-volume for-hire vehicles, to apply the existing round-trip toll rule to that sector as well. What also happened in the meantime was that the MTA changed the direction of tolling on the Verrazzano in December 2020. What had been a one-way toll, which wouldn't implicate this problem, became a two-way toll. TLC rules didn't keep up with that change. Now, for a long time, this only implicated trips to the Rockaways, where you could, you're going to pay a one-way toll to the Rockaways, and you have to pay to get back, the understanding being you're extremely unlikely to get a trip back. Now, similar to the Rockaways, among the least trafficked areas for TLC vehicles is Staten Island. And so right now what we're seeing is drivers are in the same position that they had always been in the Rockaways, where they're simply not able to get those trips back without incurring that toll. Respectfully, I think the data point that Commissioner Doe cited earlier is irrelevant to the inquiry here. The question is not, do you get another trip in Staten Island? That you go to the Staten Island Mall, you take somebody back to Tottenville. The question is, do you get somebody else to pay the toll for you coming back, or are you paying it out of pocket? Whatever form this rule takes, there absolutely has to be a gold standard that drivers cannot have to pay that out of pocket to subsidize those trips for drivers. This is just good policy. Doing otherwise incentivizes drivers refuse these trips, incentivizes destination discrimination, because any driver who sees a trip to Staten Island knows that more likely than not,
30 seconds remaining,
at a cost of $7 to themselves. One last point that I'd like to make that was not in our petition that we become aware of recently is high volume basis practice of of not reimbursing drivers who incur tolls when the companies tell them to cross a one-way toll bridge. So, for example, you would see a driver going from Mill Basin to Rockaway to do a pickup, incurring the toll on the Cross Bay to get there and not being reimbursed for that, even though they were only doing so at the company's direction. It would not otherwise have incurred that toll.
Time has expired.
We would urge the commission to also amend this rule to more broadly state that any toll that is incurred at the direction of a dispatching base also be reimbursed. Thank you for your time.
I have a question for you, sir.
Yes.
Please. Do you have any idea? I presume that there are times in which the drivers take somebody to Staten Island, and knowing this, they ask the passenger to pay the return toll. Do you have any idea of how frequently that happens?
I have no idea how often that would happen. I think right now that would be a violation of the TLC rules to do that. And if a driver were to do that, they would end up with an overcharge summons and put their license at risk. So I doubt, and I would hope that drivers are not doing that under the current rules. I think we need a rule change so that drivers don't lose money on these trips and wouldn't resort to those sorts of things.
And do you have any idea whether or not any times the businesses, this has been going on now for a couple of years, ever since the MTA changed the Verrazzano toll, needless to say. Right. So this has been going on for a while. Have you ever heard of any time in which the home base, Uber or Lyft, has made a deal with the driver to split that cost, or has it always been absorbed totally by the driver?
I have not heard of anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Commissioner Mitchell. I have a question. Suppose the driver does get a return trip back into Brooklyn or back into Manhattan from Staten Island. How do we negate the double billing that could occur? How do we negate that? Suppose he goes to Staten Island, he comes to where I work, the Staten Island Zoo, and he gets a trip back to Brooklyn. How do we negate the toll thing, the issue of getting two tolls?
So that's that's a good question. I mean, I think the understanding, and this might be where separate treatment for the taxi sector or the high volume for hire vehicle sector could be worth looking at. I think we need to look at the data first and see what the incidence of that actually is. I think in the taxi sector it'd be difficult to control for that, but I think what you're mentioning, Commissioner Mitchell, makes sense because I think TLC has sufficient data collection for high volume basis to know when that's happening, to know the incidence of when that's happening. And I think there could be a potential solution that would allow for a billing of that in the aggregate that wouldn't necessarily result in a charge to the customer. Our position isn't necessarily that it would be the customer that has to pay for it, but that it can't be the driver to subsidize it. I would be very much open to conversations about how that can happen.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, and I don't have too many chances to take a taxi or Uber to Staten Island and back. So I try to research this question a little bit, and that is, do Uber and Lyft already charge the passenger, the rider, a return toll when a vehicle is dispatched to Staten Island? Now, I try to look through their materials, and based on what I understand, what I'm able to find rather, both Uber and Lyft already allow the driver, already charge the passenger rather, a return toll for going to Staten Island. Is my understanding correct, or is that not correct?
My understanding from conversations with drivers, and I believe what Mr. Mohammed just testified before, is that is not the practice.
Well, so getting reimbursed or not is a related but corollary issue to whether or not Uber and Lyft charges passengers for return toll when they're dispatched to Staten Island, right? I think they are related but separate issues, right? There could be two policy approaches to that, right? One in which, focusing on the current framework of the rule, the two-way toll is viewed as a passenger charge, or one that looks to make sure that it is simply not assessed out of the driver's pocket, where it's otherwise unavoidable. Okay.
But to follow up, I mean, on Commissioner Chan's question, the way this whole system is structured is it's all paid through accounts. It's all paid through an account that someone has with one of these companies. So therefore, Uber and Lyft must be the ones that apply these charges, because they're the ones that are collecting the funding from the passenger. So the driver is not getting paid separately for the return toll. That's never going to happen. It's going to have to be part of the charge. And to follow Commissioner Mitchell's question, which I also am sensitive to, I mean, in the technology today, it really amazes me sometimes how these big corporations have incredible technology when it will benefit them, but they don't seem to have apply that same incredible technology when it's going to benefit the worker or their client. So clearly, I mean, Commissioner Mitchell's request is totally fair. If one driver is getting paid, if a driver is getting paid on going into Staten Island, and he's getting the toll two ways, which I understand, but then he gets a fare outside, well, then, you know, there's got to be a way technologically for that to be balanced out. How that gets balanced out?
Yeah, I don't doubt that the high volume companies would have the technology to know when that's happening, to be able to track their drivers' progress over the bridge and back, and that there could be a policy solution that TLC could come up with that could address that situation if that's a concern. What we're here to address today is that the status quo is making that money come out of the driver's pocket, and that's not an acceptable outcome for drivers. I do realize, you know, it would be good to have that data on the incidents at which those return trips are happening. We don't have that yet, but you know, very interested in having a policy conversation with TLC that could fix that equity and not create a new problem for those passengers in Staten Island.
Thank you.